every child has the opportunity to thrive. Yet the systems that most affect young children, food, health, education, and the economy, are not working for everyone. This has lifelong consequences for our children, families, and communities in Michigan. When families and communities thrive, children thrive, which is why it's so important for us to understand the potential and future possibilities of our labor market. Dr. Christopher Laney will talk more about this in his keynote presentation. He is the Vice President of Social Impact and a labor economist at Lightcast. Dr. Laney specializes in education, workforce development, economic mobility, and uses labor market data to create a more equitable workforce in and across communities. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Laney.
Thank you, Dr. White. It is so good to be back in Michigan today. I always enjoy being here among friends. Special thank you to Ryan and Kimberly for the invitation and putting on another incredible event. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you guys for being such good colleagues and friends. So my job over the next few minutes is to talk about the labor market. And so before many of you start to say this is nap time, I promise you, just stick with me for a few minutes. But before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. One, there's a lot of data and a lot of slides that you're about to see. So as you're trying to take pictures of those slides, I promise you, you will get the full slide deck. That's one. Two, you may see data that surprises you. So my hope for today is that two things. One, if you can take away one thing that you saw and you're like, I did not know that, write it on X, LinkedIn, share it, because the data can open your eyes. The second thing is, because it is so complex, the labor market is changing so rapidly to a point that I could not update these slides when new data came out on Friday. It's important to understand is what is my part in this work? Maybe it's sharing some of this data with a business that you work with in your community, a community partner. But my hope is that don't try to solve all the problems, because there's a few, but to try to pick out one thing that you can control and that you can share. So, on the agenda today, we're going to talk about economic conditions, both the past and the present. And this is going to come directly from Lightcast Research Rising Storm. I'm hopeful that people in here maybe have read that report over the last year. It's really talking about the demographic shifts that's occurring in the labor market. We have two major things happening in the labor market right now. A double disruption happening in front of our eyes. The rise of AI and the demographic shifts coinciding together. And I'm going to touch on both of those. Second, I want to take a few minutes to talk about Michigan's economy. The good, the bad, the opportunity. Opportunities and asterisks. What are we watching? And how do we prepare for this storm? Throughout the rising storm, we use this analogy of a hurricane. So throughout today's conversation, you're going to see me referring back to that storm, because we are in the midst of that storm right now, if you didn't already notice. And so this is our way of trying to organize our thoughts and storytell the data. If there's one takeaway that I've had over the course of not just this week or the last couple of days, but as practitioners, as local workforce board professionals, the question is how do we tell that story in our local regions? How do we use data to tell that story? My hope is as you see me go through today's story, that you can start to articulate that message internally and say, how do I get this out to my community partners using our local data? So let's get started. Here's what I was just talking about a few seconds ago, the rising storm. That's the study that we put out at the end of last year talking about the demographic shifts that's happening in the labor market. Highly encourage downloading that study. We put out studies about every quarter that you can download and share. The Beyond the Buzz is the latest study that we sent out last month. This is our study on AI skills and understanding the shifts in AI that's occurring today. I think two big findings that was in the Beyond the Buzz report is one, the majority of job postings in America today asking for AI skills are for non-technical jobs. 51% of all the jobs that were requesting AI skills were non-technical. That's one. Two, if you possess just one AI skill, your earnings potential goes up almost 20%. If you have two AI skills, it goes up almost 40%. So as we're talking about how do we train the future using AI in those non-technical jobs, it's more job security. The third thing here is our speed of skill change. Skills are changing rapidly. Every 2 years, we're seeing a turnover of new skills. Aside from the essential skills or durable skills that we see every day from employers, we're talking about those technical skills and how they're changing so rapidly. All these studies are free to download, highly recommend them. So let's get started. Again, I want to talk about how did we get here, which is the demographic shifts. We have a labor market today that was designed by the baby boom generation. And what does that mean? So first and foremost, it's important to understand how we got to the workforce shortages that we've experienced over the last few years. Well, in the 90s, we had a major boom in the labor market. First, birth rates were extremely high. This is part of, quote-unquote, the baby boom. And second, women were entering the labor market in droves. So as we saw labor force participation continue to drop among men in the labor force, women were making up the difference as they were entering the labor force for the first time. This here is looking at the birth rates. So you can see here from 1950 to 1970, and then 70 to 90, how they doubled in the labor market. And then that evened out over the last 20 years. This is why we had so many entrances into the labor market that was really designing what we're seeing today. Here's some of the mindsets that came out of that. So we talk about the boomer mindset among workers. One, higher education will help me get the job that I want. In a very competitive landscape, you have to differentiate yourself. Higher education was the way to do that. I will move to get the best job for me. Well, right now, migration for a job is at its lowest that we've seen in decades. People are no longer moving across the country for that job, partly because the cost of living almost across the entire country is pretty high, and the wages have not been there. I need to weigh the benefit of a family against the cost of my career. So this is another example of we're going to wait, or we're going to wait so I can build out my career. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does go into the numbers. My highest political priorities is creating jobs and decreasing unemployment. How many times have we seen somebody get on the stump and say, we're going to create more jobs, we're going to create more jobs? Well, the question that we've been asking the last few years is, who's going to fill those jobs? The last thing, or a couple more things, I do not want immigrants coming to steal my jobs. In a highly competitive landscape, you don't want more competition. So this was a narrative that continued and continued. And to this day, as we're trying to turn that narrative around with certain groups, the challenge is there are still people that still believe that immigrants are coming to steal jobs. I need to look out for number one and prioritize my company, then prioritize my company loyalty. There was a time where companies would always put the employer first, and they would ensure anything they could do to keep that employee. However, times changed, and companies started to realize, well, I have so many workers available that I'll just do layoffs during downtimes, and then I'll hire them back when it's up times. Well, unfortunately, that didn't actually play out the way they expected. From an employer standpoint, I do not need to take on the burden of training because I can take workers that come preloaded with all the skills. What we pay is what we pay. If you don't like it, oh well. Now we've seen what we've called wage inflation, people competing for talent. When I'm hiring, I can expect plenty of applicants because I can limit the field with highly specific qualifications and requirements. It's a hassle to go through some of the applicants, so I'll screen out as many candidates as possible. And lastly, we can afford to lay off people during slow times, during those cycles as a company.